Hello there, my name is Wren, and today I'm drawing some characters from the cringy Wattpad stories I wrote when I was in middle school. If you like art, storytelling, comics, and D&D, subscribe for videos every other Sunday-ish. And if you want to join the Crow's Nest Discord server filled with other creative and friendly people, the invite link is in the description. Just as a bit of fair warning, I am going to struggle keeping my shit together because some of the weird gems I've dug up from the gravesite that was my 2016 Wattpad profile have never brought me both so much pain and so much laughter at the same time. I have so many even more cringe-inducing stories and characters other than the 3 I've drawn for today, but just for simplicity's sake and my own sanity, I'll be focusing on a combination of one story that's not that badly written, but could have used some improvement, and another story where I was consistently setting myself up for failure. Let's start with some background, and what I will start with is a tried and true bit of advice for young writers, which is kill the part of you that cringes. So rather than simply coming up here and publicly humiliating myself like the ink-stained clown I am, I'm going to instead cover the characters and stories I wrote, talk about the successes and pitfalls I fell into as a fledgling author, and what I would change about these characters and their stories now that I have more years of experience under my belt. Fun fact about Wattpad, for those of you who may not know, Wattpad is a site where you can write stories and books. On Wattpad, you're allowed to upload book covers to the site, and this feature is what sparked my love of graphic design. I actually ended up designing covers for other authors in my free time when I was young, and it was the first time I really loved what I was doing for a change. I even have one of these book covers in my portfolio to this day because honestly, for a book cover I made at 13, it still holds up and it slaps and I love it. For now, let's take ourselves back in time. It's the year 2017. Young Wren was a 14-year-old 8th grader surviving middle school by the skin of their teeth and had acquired a small group of friends for the very first time. Our young writer was going through a lot, and if I could go back, this is some advice I would give them. 1. Don't take yourself so seriously. When I first got into writing with my school's Writers League, I set such high standards for myself. Being told you're good at something when you're a perfectionist gives you an outlet for both great joy and great despair. I wanted to be a published author so bad as a kid, and I planned to as an adult with comics instead of prose. So with all of these high standards, I ended up sometimes having this fantasy of a magnum opus where I'd hyperfixate on a story and go, this is the one. And it's good to love your story, but I did this for every story I wrote. If you go with the flow, you'll have a lot more fun and you won't be so hard on criticizing your work to the point of depressing yourself. But the reason why this was a major problem for me is that when you treat every single story like it's gonna be, the one, you end up being way more dramatic than you need to be, which is why some of my writing is so dramatic. Dear God, looking back on this was painful. Number 2, learn to not death grip your first idea. There are a couple of Margaret Atwood quotes I think are very prevalent here. One being, "The waste paper basket is your friend. It was invented for you by God." And do it more, fail better. And I definitely think I failed better in this 2-chapter story introduction I wrote in 2017 called Camp Lunae, where our first character, Avalon White, is from. I had been a fan of Hotel Transylvania, and the concept of vampire stories in general were very popular in the 2010s, so I decided to write my own vampire story that hinged on a madness arc. Avalon White is a teen-ish vampire who's never had human blood in her life and has been sent to Camp Lunae to learn how to hone vampiric abilities like flight and such. There's just one problem though. She's never had human blood before due to her parents' pacifist beliefs, and as a result she's very sickly and weak, pretty much emaciated. The plot was supposed to be Avalon having an internal struggle with the addiction human blood was providing her. Though I didn't really write enough to find out where it was going, back then I never really wrote outlines for my stories. It was more so me writing chapters as I came up with them. Speaking of, here's a quote from that first chapter. "A darkness settles over the sky as the last of the sun sets. One by one, campers came out of their cabins and stepped up to the platform. I'm next. I am at the top of a 20-story wooden tower. The planks and beams are worn and damp with age, creaking underneath the combined weight of my instructor and I. As the last of the sunlight fades, the moon begins to shine its milky white face onto the campgrounds of Camp Lunae. My feet are bare as I extend one leg out, the cold night air finding my lungs and chilling my breath, each exhale puffing out a cloud of white. My instructor, Miss Lubov, is at my side, ready to point out any mistakes. My objective is simple: turn into a bat and achieve takeoff before I plummet to the ground. Either I make it in time, or I die for the second time. Now, when it comes to grading these, I'm not really grading, I'm just really trying to point out like the merits these had and the challenges I encountered. So I'm gonna be, I'm gonna start off pretty easy on myself. Merits, I think I painted a pretty vivid picture here, especially for like only being like 14. I think I like described the scene pretty clearly, and I kind of set the scene as pretty colorfully as I could. I ended up dropping hints and vocabulary that were world specific without being too obvious. This is further into the story. I ended up showing the vampires like train of thought. They're almost like medical specific. So instead of saying things like blood pressure, they just refer to it as BP, like euphemisms that are centric to their society. And I managed to actually integrate these pretty cleanly, especially when it came to slang words, which is better compared to what I used to do and what I know a lot of other young authors might do, where when you have world-specific terminology, say, for example, say that dags, I made that up right now, say dags is a swear word. Sometimes what I'll see young authors do when they have like new words for things, they'll say like dags, and then they'll like emphasize and try to explain what it means instead of just letting the story breathe for itself. I know when I was very young, I didn't really understand, like, you need to treat the reader as intelligent. Depending on your age group that you're writing for, at least for me, writing for like teens and young adults, treat your reader as intelligent. Readers can pick up on context clues. You don't need to spell out every single little thing. And considering that was a main problem I used to have coming on, this is one of my like later stories, and I can tell that I really picked that up from my writing instructor who pointed this out to me. And so good for little me for taking that in stride. However, here are the challenges that came with this story as I was reading it through. Here are some of the challenges, however. Present tense was probably not the best choice. While present tense is usually best for emotion-heavy action scenes like this one, I feel like Avalon's descent into madness would have been better written in past tense, and probably with another perspective to give another outlook on how her actions affect the campground and relationships, as this truly is a villain's origin story. And I feel like having it be in present tense, it doesn't really capture as much as it could, because there are just some pitfalls with present tense, and I don't think it suits the story as well as I thought it did. Next one is contradictions are aplenty in this one. For example, in the quote I just read you, Avalon says right there that if she falls, she'll die again. But not even a couple paragraphs later, she lands on a net, which, catches her. Little things like this were all over the story, like how in one moment she feels it's ethically wrong to drink human blood because of the way her parents raised her, and in the next, she's accepting peer pressure from her friend passing a bloody strawberry syrup shake, when it's very likely she's been offered blood before and resisted. The idea she only just now is trying it after so long, and only after one conversation, really weakens any of the conviction built up by her character. If I were rewriting this now, what I would do instead is establish rules early for vampirism. How does blood affect vampires, and what does it specifically do? Is there such a thing as withdrawals? Because the shake Avalon drinks is said to only be 25% of the whole thing, and she only had a sip. It's like someone getting blackout drunk after having a small sip of wine. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you know how substances work, and this really highlighted the fact that I was too young to really... I was too young and I didn't have a lot of understanding of like how addictive things worked, so I couldn't really write it in a like believable way. But this is also blood. It's fantastical, so you get a little more wiggle room. Concentration of percentages of anything do matter, and while info dumping isn't advised and your reader doesn't need to know every bit of lore, these are things you should be aware of as an author, and I definitely should have set these rules, even if I was never going to fully explain them in the first chapter, Up next, we have another old story of mine, Our Inhumane Society. I swear to God, this story, reading it back, it might just be my 13th reason, my dudes. This is, I know that first one didn't sound cringe. Here it is. Here's the cringe. I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep my shit together. This is, I can't. Okay. Our Inhumane Society is where our next two characters are from. It was my first attempt at writing a lesson I had learned that I wanted to tell. This is something you'll see pretty commonly when it comes to things I make. I grew up pretty friendless my whole life outside of one or two stray people, and 8th grade was like the first time I had an actual friend group, small as it was, and I wanted to write a story where the main character had a self-healing journey. The problem with this story is that I decided to exaggerate the protagonist to such a degree that she had almost become like hyperbole, almost a caricature of younger me, which she was inspired by. And she pretty much just became like if the trope of teen angst was personified and then turned up to an 11. Like she's so hostile to everyone. And because you'll see, it gets bad, you'll see. I'm sorry, the audio in this one is probably not going to be as polished as usual because you know what? This is just a conversation of you and me going through cringy shit I wrote in middle school. I'm not even gonna pretend like this is a polished video essay like my other ones. Fuck that. All holds are off. I'm not even gonna try not swearing in this one. Screw it. This one can be a little messy. I'm doing a character design video next week. Okay. Speaking of our protagonist, meet Cathy Greenwald, the bitter and angry ball of rage and sarcasm being drawn at the moment. This story was supposed to be written as Cathy's diary project assigned by her English teacher. Here's a quote from Cathy's story. 11:30 a.m., Miss Vaughn's English class. Hi, my name is Cathy Greenwald, and apparently I'm supposed to write in a journal for a stupid English assignment. Don't expect me to vent about my problems or the fact that people at this school see me as a mortal enemy. Oh god. Let me introduce you to this screwed up world of ours, filled with plastic buildings and paper people, ready to give you the deepest cut. I really thought I was doing something with that one, didn't I? Jesus Christ. You're probably expecting to hear dramatic, extravagant, cliche stories of mine. Sorry, but you probably came to the wrong place. It's either this or a 10-page essay on Moby Dick. Do I sound like the type of person who would read that book? No, I didn't think so. And I don't get how that ancient historical artifact did it. I'm referring to Shakespeare, but it doesn't matter. Just know I won't waste my time contemplating your opinion of my opinion. Sorry, Miss Vaughn, but you asked for this. CG. Jesus Christ. Oh my god. Okay, it is so clear, especially like being that I have graduated from high school now. The headphones are off. This might be a longer video because this is gonna be more stream of consciousness. I don't care if like 4 people watch this, who knows? But so I wrote this heavily, I'm going to emphasize, I wrote this in middle school. My only impression as a like Florida teen who's never been to high school, my only impression of high school was movies and books. Like the tropes that get made fun of, like from like high school movies and books and stuff, that's what I genuinely believe that that's what it was like. And my only impression of what school was like was elementary and middle school. And considering that I was heavily bullied like in elementary and middle school, I assumed that like transitioned over into high school. And for a lot of people it does, but at least in my high school was massive, so it was too big to like, nobody gave a shit about anybody else. Like cliques weren't really a thing. Like the only like cliquey things is if you like had a club or you were in band. If you were in band, in theater, or in sports, those were really the only cliques. I guess I was a part of the art clique because I was with the art kids, but like there's no like rivalry with the band nerds and the jocks. They're often friends, and there was so much heavy generalizing because I genuinely had no clue how any of it added up. So if you're wondering why everything sounds like if I ripped High School Musical, threw it into a garbage disposal, and said, hey, this is exactly how high school was, it's because that was my impression. Dear, it gets worse. Oh my god, it gets so much worse. I am literally pulling the least embarrassing quotes out of this one because I need to be able to show my face again. I need to be able to, like, have some level of dignity after this. Oh, so, like, these are the least embarrassing ones. So, breaking down this quote by itself. First thing I will always say, especially after writing this, I failed hard with Art in Humane Society, which sucks because I like the premise, but it was just executed so poorly. First thing I would change is I like the idea of a, like, you know, sardonic, know-it-all protagonist who's kind of unlikable in the beginning. But I wrote her in a way where, like, she assumes the reader knows information, and because, like, you know, she's the author, she's telling you things, like, it comes off as her so, like, being such an asshole about it. But the thing is, one thing I completely disregarded and didn't think about, I was too in my head about, was the fact that this technically isn't just Cathy's diary. This is Cathy having a conversation with her teacher. Like, this, everything she's saying when she addresses the reader, she's addressing her teacher. She's addressing a grown adult, and this is how she speaks. And, oh, this, and I wouldn't even say she likes Miss Vaughn. I would say she just hates Miss Vaughn the least. Like, she truly has an issue with everybody. Like, I was jaded, and I kept to myself a lot, but even I wasn't this fucking hostile. And I think I made her so unrealistic and so annoying that you really can't, like, keep it together as part of it. Oh god, okay, it gets worse. Here's the next one. Context, she is in science class and she's getting assigned lab partners. Her classmate Dexter got assigned to her. He's not happy about it, but he's gonna make the best of it. Let me just read it. I wanna throw up reading this. Oh god. So what are you even doing? Dexter asks me. I look at him with a blank stare, writing down my opinion of this pathetic and sinful world, expressing melancholy thoughts through paper, and specifically my personal metaphors for this pretentious school. Any other quips to make, wise guy? Tension crept into my voice. Dexter's eyebrows droop a little. You're very depressing, aren't you? All right, I am this close to sucking him in the nose. I can feel my face change a little. I suppose I'm glaring at him, but I'm not entirely sure. Just because I'm quiet and don't have a crowd of people following me, that does not make me depressed. But what really pisses me off is people like you pushing me to the end of my rope with hackneyed comments. So no, I am not depressed. You're just a narrow-minded jerk. Once again, I have rendered another human being speechless. I can't. This is gonna kill me. Fuck. Oh, again, this is a matter of, like, I wanted her to be sarcastic, I wanted her to be funny, but she is having way too strong of a reaction to way too simple of a sentence. And again, this came down to, I had written fantasy for so long that I did not understand the concept of, like restraint in social situations when it came to a contemporary novel, which is what this was. It was my first time writing contemporary, and that is very evident because everything is extremely dramatic. Oh, Christ. Why am I doing this video again? But yeah, again, something I would definitely address here is, like, I forget who, there's a screenwriter on YouTube I follow that talked about, like, putting your dialogue through a human filter. And I tried putting this dialogue through Cathy's filter, and truthfully, with the way I wrote this character, this is definitely something she would have said. Good lord. And here's the worst one of all. Here's the worst one of all that I'm gonna put in the fucking thumbnail. Me, I'm more... Lord. Of course, this is all hypothetical. No one would ever ask for my notes. They all think I'm an idiot. That I can't see past their makeup and aftershave. All they are is paper, sharp enough to slice me to ribbons. Me, I'm more like a puddle of Oobleck. I usually flow and take the shape of situations, but when I'm hit, I take it and I don't let that pressure sink past my first layer of skin. Am I a poet? No, not in a million years. But that doesn't mean I can't make one hell of a metaphor. I made a metaphor about Oobleck! I made a metaphor about fucking Oobleck. I can't. I'm struggling. I'm struggling so hard to get through this. So yeah, merits? I don't know if this story has any. I think the only thing I would say with merits for this is that you know the plot right immediately. You know who Cathy is and her motivations right from sentence 1. And considering I have read some stories where the plot really doesn't happen for the first couple chapters, I can at least give myself that. This book knows what it is. I'm literally giving myself acid reflux reading this. My god. Yeah, so here's what I would do to fix this. I would definitely make Cathy a little more realistic. This is a contemporary story, so while it is not fantastical, even people have limitations. Cathy is batting 1,000 all the time, so everything she says doesn't have much impact. If I was writing an unlikable character, I'd probably have her have some redeeming qualities. Even in this extreme version of Cathy, she can be funny here and there, but she assumes too much of the reader, and she has a penchant for big words but uses them awkwardly, and it's not suitable for YA without her coming off as pretentious and annoying, so she ends up becoming sort of a hypocrite. I definitely would have dialed her back and shown off more of this aggression slowly. I kind of came out swinging with this, and that's definitely something I would change. Finally, we have a taste of the direction Cathy's character was supposed to go to, and in my favorite illustration of the bunch, Piper Bratsbury, the slick skater girl with a sweet tooth and a sweet heart. I wrote her as a kind of homage to the first female friend I had that brought me out of my own shell, and my first mistake was honestly waiting several chapters to introduce her. Piper manages to cut through Cathy's barriers and walls from pretty much day one and brings out the best in her. I did describe her a little too, main character-ish TM, but she is meant to be the polar opposite to Cathy. If I were to redo Piper's character, I'd probably have her meet Cathy within chapter 2, or even chapter 3, not a quarter of the way through the book, because without that change, you end up reading Cathy to be this exaggerated caricature of anger and sarcasm that doesn't come off as clever as much as it does hostile. Frankly, Piper's the most realistic character I wrote at this age. She's nice, welcoming, but doesn't have a huge ego that prevents her from making fun of herself. But all in all, I think definitely the best part of our Humane Society was Piper. I like Piper's characters a lot. She's just very sweet to Cathy, even though she has no reason to be. But yeah, I don't know what it was. I definitely would intersperse her here and there. I probably should have had Piper run into Cathy at the party where she got thrown into the pool. That definitely would have been helpful. But yeah, I'm sorry if this video wasn't as cringy as you hoped. I really wanted to emphasize that being cringe is healthy. It's a part of growth. Cringe is just a word people throw at interests and behaviors they think are weird and don't like. Accepting your unashamed inner child helps your writing process, and you can learn a lot from it. I know I haven't talked about it much, but writing is important to me, and I spent a lot of time learning from my failures, so if there's one thing you should take away from this, it's that the best way to become a better writer is to write. Fail. Write some more. Fail some more, and learn as much as you can. Writing is rewriting. And you wanna know what's crazy? For as cringy as these two stories seem, I still had users consistently reading and enjoying them. I even had a small dedicated following towards my middle school poetry back in the day. Even if you aren't completely happy with something you've made, even if you've made something bad, there's still going to be someone out there that likes what you do. Heck, take my videos. Even though I'm super proud of them, I still see the flaws in my art, in my voice, and how much of a chatterbox I am. If you've made it this far in, then you probably don't completely dislike what I'm making and have to say. And that's one more person than I thought would ever listen to me talk about creative nonsense on the internet. So give yourself some credit. Every author started out scrambling through idea after idea, scratching the literary itch they could feel deep inside them. In the famous words of Margaret Atwood, the only way you become a writer is by writing. There is no other way. So go write, go fail, go write some more. But most of all, stay hydrated, stay safe, and be yourselves. Ciao!